They said her voice was too soft for the battlefield, too gentle for combat, too quiet for command. 6 battle-hardened Marines thought they knew exactly what they were dealing with when they saw the petite woman with the calm demeanor and measured words. They were about to learn the most expensive lesson of their military careers, that the deadliest weapons often come in the most unexpected packages. This is the true story of how one woman's journey from dismissed outsider to elite warrior would redefine everything those around her thought they knew about strength, leadership, and what it really means to be unstoppable. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Naval Special Warfare Training Compound in Coronado, California, as Sarah Chun adjusted her gear one final time. The ocean breeze carried the familiar scent of salt and diesel fuel, mixing with the ever-present aroma of sweat and determination that seemed to permeate every surface of the facility. At 5 feet 4 inches and weighing barely 130 pounds, she stood in stark contrast to the towering figures surrounding her in the staging area. Her voice, when she spoke to her training partner about equipment checks, carried a distinctive quality that had followed her throughout her military career. It was soft, almost melodic, with careful enunciation that suggested thoughtfulness rather than aggression. This same voice had been the subject of countless conversations among her peers, instructors, and now, the 6 Marines who would be participating in today's joint training exercise. "Listen to that," whispered Gunnery Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez to his companion, Staff Sergeant James Mitchell, as Sarah discussed tactical approaches with her team leader. "Sounds like she's ordering coffee, not planning a mission. How's she supposed to give commands in combat if nobody can hear her over gunfire?" The comment drew muted chuckles from the other Marines in their group. These weren't ordinary soldiers making casual observations. Each man represented years of elite training, multiple deployments, and hard-earned respect within the Corps. Rodriguez had survived 3 tours in Afghanistan, earning a Bronze Star for actions that saved his entire squad during an ambush in Helmand Province. Mitchell carried scars from an IED blast in Iraq that had taken out half his convoy, but left him more determined than ever to prove his worth. Sergeant First Class Tony Vasquez, a Force Recon veteran with arms that looked like they could crush steel, shook his head as he observed Sarah methodically checking her weapon. "I get that things are changing, but come on. Look at her. My little sister's tougher than that. And she teaches elementary school. What happens when things get real? And she needs to take charge. Who's going to follow someone who asks politely instead of demanding results?" The sentiment was echoed by the remaining 3 Marines. Corporal Derek Thompson, whose reputation for aggressive tactics had earned him recognition in urban warfare training. Lance Corporal Miguel Santos, whose compact frame disguised an explosive power that had made him a legend in hand-to-hand combat competitions. And Private First Class Jake Morrison, the youngest of the group, but already showing promise, that had his superiors talking about fast-track promotion. What none of these battle-tested warriors understood was the journey that had brought Sarah to this moment. Born in San Francisco to parents who had immigrated from Taiwan, she had grown up in a household where respect was earned through actions, not volume. Her father, a software engineer, had taught her that true strength came from precision and preparation. Her mother, a trauma surgeon, had demonstrated daily that life and death decisions required calm focus, not emotional outbursts. The soft voice they mocked had been shaped by years of carefully chosen words. As the youngest child in a family of high achievers, Sarah had learned early that speaking thoughtfully carried more weight than speaking loudly. This lesson had served her well through her undergraduate degree in aerospace engineering at Stanford, where she had consistently outperformed classmates who relied on bluster rather than brilliance. Her decision to join the Navy had surprised everyone, including herself. The turning point had come during a campus presentation by a Navy recruiter who spoke about opportunities in naval special warfare. While other students focused on the prestige and adventure aspects, Sarah found herself drawn to the technical challenges and the promise of pushing human performance to its absolute limits. The path to becoming a Navy SEAL had been anything but traditional for someone of her background. The initial resistance she faced had nothing to do with her gender. The Navy had been increasingly open to qualified candidates regardless of demographic factors. Instead, the The skepticism centered on her physical stature and that distinctive voice that seemed to suggest diplomacy rather than domination. Basic underwater demolition/SEAL training had been a crucible that transformed her in ways she never anticipated. The notorious Hell Week, where candidates endure 5.5 days of continuous physical and mental challenges on fewer than 4 hours of sleep, had broken larger and seemingly stronger individuals. Sarah had survived not through brute force, but through the kind of methodical endurance that her instructors had rarely encountered. Chief Petty Officer Williams, a 20-year veteran who had seen hundreds of candidates come and go, remembered her approach distinctly. Most people try to muscle through the hardest parts, he had told his fellow instructors. Chen treats every challenge like an engineering problem that needs solving. She calculates energy expenditure, plans rest intervals, and somehow convinces her body to keep going when logic says it should quit. The specialized training that followed had revealed capabilities that surprised even Sarah herself. Advanced weapons training showed that her steady hands and analytical mind translated into shooting accuracy that consistently outperformed her peers. Underwater demolition work revealed an almost supernatural ability to remain calm in environments where panic meant death. Close quarters combat instruction had been the biggest revelation of all. Her martial arts background, which she had pursued since childhood, combined with her engineering mindset to create a fighting style that was devastatingly effective precisely because it didn't look intimidating. Where other operators relied on strength and aggression, Sarah had developed an approach based on leverage, timing, and an understanding of human anatomy that allowed her to neutralize threats with minimal apparent effort. The Marine observers watching her prepare for today's exercise had no knowledge of her performance record. They didn't know about the underwater navigation exercise, where she had outperformed a team leader with 10 years more experience. They hadn't heard about the hostage rescue simulation, where her soft-spoken coordination had resulted in 0 civilian casualties, while other teams struggled with communication breakdowns. They certainly weren't aware of her designation as one of the top 5 close-quarters combat specialists in her class. Lieutenant Commander Patricia Hayes, the exercise coordinator, reviewed the day's schedule with mixed feelings. Joint training exercises between different branches of the military were essential for building cooperation and understanding, but they also had a tendency to bring out competitive instincts that weren't always productive. She had specifically requested Sarah's participation in today's exercise because recent evaluations had marked her as someone with exceptional potential for leadership roles. The exercise itself was designed to test multiple skill sets under pressure. Teams would navigate a complex facility designed to simulate a terrorist stronghold, with objectives that required both individual excellence and coordinated teamwork. The facility included underwater approaches, vertical climbing sections, close quarters combat scenarios, and situations requiring precise marksmanship under time pressure. What made today's exercise particularly significant was its design as an evaluation tool. Military leadership was increasingly interested in identifying operators who could excel in diverse conditions while working with personnel from different branches. The ability to adapt quickly to new team dynamics while maintaining operational effectiveness was becoming crucial as military operations grew more complex and joint service cooperation became the norm rather than the exception. Sarah completed her equipment check with characteristic thoroughness. Her gear loadout reflected the same analytical approach she brought to every aspect of her training. Every item had been selected for optimal performance and reliability, with backup systems planned for critical components. Her weapon configuration prioritized accuracy and reliability over impressive appearance, and her tactical vest was arranged for maximum efficiency of movement. "All right, people, gather around," Lieutenant Commander Hayes called out to the assembled group. "Today's exercise is about more than individual performance. We're evaluating how effectively operators from different branches can integrate and adapt to changing circumstances. You'll be working in mixed teams, and leadership roles may shift based on the specific requirements of each phase." The Marines exchanged glances that clearly communicated their expectations about who would end up leading and who would be following. Rodriguez had already mentally assigned Sarah to a support role that would keep her out of the primary action. The assumption was so automatic that none of them considered alternative possibilities. Phase 1 begins with underwater infiltration. Hayes continued. Teams will approach the facility through the harbor channel, neutralize perimeter security, and establish entry point for the land-based portion of the exercise. Navigation will be challenging, and timing is critical. Any team that fails to achieve their objectives within the allocated time frame will face penalty scenarios in the later phases. Sarah listened to the briefing with the same focused attention she had learned to apply to complex engineering problems. She was already visualizing the underwater approach, calculating current patterns, and considering optimal routes that would minimize exposure while maximizing speed. Her breathing remained steady and her posture relaxed, giving no outward indication of the rapid tactical analysis taking place in her mind. The team assignments were announced, and Sarah found herself grouped with 3 of the Marines: Rodriguez, Mitchell, and Vasquez. The remaining Marines formed a second team with other Navy personnel. As the groups separated to finalize their preparations, the comments from her new teammates began almost immediately. "Okay, Chin," Rodriguez said, his tone suggesting he was addressing a subordinate despite their equal ranks. "Here's how this is going to work. Mitchell and I will take point on the underwater phase. You and Vasquez handle support and backup. Once we're inside the facility, I'll coordinate movement, and Vasquez will handle any heavy contact situations. You stick close and follow our lead." The assumption that leadership would automatically fall to him seemed so natural to Rodriguez that he didn't pause to consider whether his new teammate might have relevant experience or alternative perspectives. His military career had been built on decisive action and clear hierarchies, and nothing in Sarah's demeanor suggested she would challenge that approach. Sarah's response was characteristic, measured, polite, and giving no indication of offense. "I understand your preference for point leadership," she said quietly. "I'd like to review the underwater route options before we commit to a specific approach. The harbor channel has some challenging current patterns that might affect our timing." Mitchell interpreted her comment as nervous hesitation rather than tactical insight. "Don't worry about the currents," he said with the confidence of someone who had conducted water operations in combat zones. "Rodriguez and I have done this kind of thing plenty of times. The key is moving fast and staying aggressive. Hesitation gets you killed in the water." What Mitchell didn't know was that Sarah had spent the previous month studying every detail of the harbor channel as part of her advanced underwater operations training. She had memorized current patterns, seasonal variations, and optimal entry points based on extensive analysis of environmental data. Her suggestion wasn't born from nervousness, but from a level of preparation that exceeded what any of her teammates had undertaken. Vasquez, who had been quietly observing the interaction, added his own perspective. "Look, no disrespect, but underwater work is physical. You need to be able to move through heavy currents and handle your gear while dealing with low visibility and time pressure. This isn't a swimming pool exercise. Are you sure you're ready for that kind of intensity?" The question reflected genuine concern rather than deliberate dismissal, but it revealed the same underlying assumption that had followed Sarah throughout her training. Despite her successful completion of every qualification requirement and her documented performance in similar exercises, her teammates were still approaching her as an unknown quantity who would likely need protection rather than partnership. Sarah's answer was typically direct. "I appreciate the concern. I'm confident in my underwater capabilities and ready to contribute to the team's success. If we encounter situations where my experience can help the team, I hope you'll be open to tactical adjustments." The phrasing was diplomatic enough to avoid creating conflict while still asserting her readiness to participate fully in the operation. It was the kind of response that had served her well in environments where direct confrontation would have been counterproductive, but it also reinforced her teammates' impression that she was more focused on avoiding trouble than creating solutions. As the teams completed their final preparations and moved toward the water entry point, the stage was set for a confrontation between expectations and reality that would reshape everyone's understanding of what effective leadership looked like. The Marines were about to discover that their assumptions about strength, voice, and command presence were based on incomplete information. The harbor water was cold and dark as the teams entered the water for the beginning of an exercise that would test more than their tactical skills. It would challenge their ability to recognize excellence in forms they hadn't expected and adapt to leadership that didn't match their preconceptions. Sarah slipped into the water with the fluid motion of someone completely at home in the aquatic environment. Her breathing remained steady, her movements efficient, and her focus already shifting to the complex navigation challenges ahead. The soft voice that had drawn so much comment would soon prove to be just one element of a capability package that was about to redefine her teammates' understanding of what made an elite operator. The first phase of their education was about to begin, and none of them were prepared for how dramatically their assumptions would be challenged. The water temperature registered 48 degrees Fahrenheit as Sarah's dive computer automatically logged their entry point. The harbor channel stretched ahead of them, a maze of underwater obstacles, shifting currents, and navigational challenges that would test every aspect of their aquatic training. Rodriguez had insisted on taking the lead position, with Mitchell swimming close behind and Vasquez maintaining security watch while Sarah brought up the rear. The formation made tactical sense from Rodriguez's perspective, putting the experienced operators in positions of primary responsibility while keeping the unknown quantity in a protected position. What he hadn't anticipated was how quickly his confidence would be challenged by the reality of the underwater environment they were entering. The first indication that their assumptions might need adjustment came less than 10 minutes into the swim. Rodriguez had chosen a direct route toward their target, prioritizing speed over stealth and relying on physical strength to power through the current patterns he encountered. This approach had served him well in previous operations, but the harbor channel presented unique challenges that his experience hadn't prepared him for. Sarah, swimming 20 meters behind the lead group, could see the inefficiency building in their approach. Rodriguez was fighting against a current that could be avoided entirely with a slight course correction. Mitchell was burning energy, maintaining position in water that offered no tactical advantage over alternative routes. Both men were making decisions based on general principles rather than specific environmental analysis. Her underwater navigation training had covered this exact scenario in exhaustive detail. The harbor channel featured a complex interaction between tidal flows, thermal layers, and underwater topography that created both opportunities and hazards for tactical swimmers. The route Rodriguez had chosen would eventually force them into a bottleneck area where they would be exposed to observation while fighting against increasingly difficult water conditions. Sarah's dive computer showed they were falling behind the timeline necessary to reach their first objective. More concerning, she could see that Rodriguez's swimming rhythm was already showing signs of fatigue that would compound as they encountered stronger currents ahead. The aggressive pace he was setting would leave the team exhausted before they reached the critical phases of their infiltration. She moved forward in the formation until she was swimming alongside Vasquez, then activated her underwater communication system. The soft voice that had drawn so much comment carried clearly through the water as she spoke in her throat microphone. Vasquez, we need to adjust our route. Current patterns ahead will slow us down and exhaust the team. I can guide us through an alternative approach that will save time and energy. Vasquez's response reflected his surprise at hearing tactical input from the team member he had expected to remain silent during the underwater phase. Rodriguez is handling navigation. Are you seeing something specific that concerns you? Sarah's answer was precise and technical. We're heading into a convergence zone where opposing currents create turbulence. The direct route will force us to swim against a 3-knot current while maintaining depth that puts us in the worst part of the flow pattern. Alternative route uses the thermal layer boundary to our advantage and reaches the same objective 8 minutes faster. The level of detail in her analysis made it clear that her suggestion wasn't based on general nervousness, but on specific environmental knowledge. Vasquez found himself in the unexpected position of having to choose between following established team hierarchy and considering tactical input that sounded professionally informed. Rodriguez, he transmitted forward to the team leader. Chen has some route information you might want to hear. The response from Rodriguez carried clear irritation. We're making good time on the current heading. Tell her to maintain position and focus on keeping up with the pace. We can't afford to slow down for course corrections based on theoretical concerns. The dismissal was automatic and absolute, reflecting Rodriguez's assumption that Sarah's input was motivated by discomfort rather than expertise. He had built his reputation on decisive leadership that didn't second-guess tactical decisions once they were made. In his experience, operators who suggested alternative approaches during critical phases were usually looking for ways to avoid the hardest parts of the mission. Sarah's response surprised both Marines within communication range. Rather than accepting the dismissal or pushing harder for her suggestion, she simply said, "Understood. I'll maintain current position and monitor our progress against timeline requirements." The reply was professionally neutral, while still indicating that she was tracking mission-critical information that might become relevant later. It was the kind of response that suggested she was prepared to support the team's chosen approach while remaining ready to contribute if circumstances changed. 25 minutes into the underwater phase, those circumstances began to change dramatically. Rodriguez encountered the current convergence zone exactly as Sarah had predicted, and the impact on the team's progress was immediately apparent. What had been a manageable swimming pace suddenly required maximum effort just to maintain forward momentum. Mitchell, swimming behind Rodriguez, found himself struggling to hold position as the turbulent water made precise navigation nearly impossible. The energy expenditure required to fight through the difficult conditions was far beyond what their mission timeline had allocated, and both lead swimmers were beginning to show signs of significant fatigue. Vasquez, monitoring the situation from a security position, could see that their approach was failing. The team was burning through their energy reserves while falling behind their required timeline. More critically, the noise and disturbance they were creating in the turbulent water was far beyond acceptable levels for stealth infiltration. "Rodriguez, we need to reassess," Vasquez transmitted. "Current conditions are worse than expected, and we're losing time. Chen's route suggestion might be worth considering." The admission was difficult for Vasquez, whose instincts told him to support his fellow Marines' leadership decisions. But his tactical experience also told him that successful operations required the flexibility to adapt when initial plans encountered unexpected obstacles. Rodriguez's response came through heavy breathing that revealed the physical toll the current conditions were taking. "Negative. We push through. Switching routes now will cost more time than we'll save. Maintain current heading and pick up the pace." The order reflected determination rather than tactical analysis. Rodriguez was applying the kind of aggressive persistence that had served him well in ground combat situations, but underwater operations followed different rules. Fighting against environmental conditions that could be avoided was a waste of resources that successful teams learned to recognize and address. Sarah, monitoring the team's progress from her position, could see the building crisis in their approach. The current patterns ahead would only get worse, and the energy expenditure required to reach their objective through this route would leave them unable to perform effectively in the land-based phases of the exercise. More immediately concerning, Rodriguez's swimming rhythm showed signs of exhaustion that suggested potential safety issues. She made a decision that would have significant consequences for team dynamics. Rather than continuing to follow at a distance, she moved forward in the formation until she was swimming directly behind Mitchell. Her movement was smooth and efficient, covering the distance with an ease that contrasted sharply with the struggle her teammates were experiencing. "Rodriguez," she transmitted, her soft voice carrying clearly through the water communication system. "I'm going to move to lead position and guide us through the alternative route. The current approach is compromising mission success and potentially creating safety issues." The statement was direct and professional, but it represented a fundamental challenge to the team hierarchy that Rodriguez had established. Sarah wasn't asking for permission or suggesting that they consider alternatives. She was informing the team that she was taking action to address a tactical problem. Rodriguez's response was immediate and heated. "Negative, Chun. You maintain your position and follow our lead. I'm not changing our approach based on concerns from someone who's never operated in real-world conditions." The dismissal revealed Rodriguez's core assumption about Sarah's experience level. Despite her documented training and qualifications, he was still thinking of her as a theoretical operator rather than a practical one. The idea that she might have superior knowledge of the specific conditions they were facing didn't fit his framework for understanding team capabilities. Sarah's next action shocked everyone on the team. Instead of arguing or retreating, she smoothly accelerated past Mitchell and Rodriguez, taking point position with a display of underwater speed and efficiency that neither Marine had anticipated. Her movement through the water was so fluid and controlled that it made their struggles with the current conditions look amateurish by comparison. "Following my lead to target objective," she transmitted calmly. "Alternative route begins in 30 seconds. Maintain close formation and adjust breathing rhythm to match pace." The tone of her communication had shifted subtly, but significantly. The diplomatic phrasing that had characterized her earlier interactions was replaced by clear, direct commands issued with absolute confidence. This was the voice of someone who knew exactly what she was doing and expected her instructions to be followed. Rodriguez found himself in an unprecedented situation. His position as team leader had been effectively usurped by the team member he had been most prepared to dismiss. His instinct was to reassert control, but the reality of their tactical situation made that impulse problematic. Sarah's movements through the water demonstrated capabilities that exceeded his own, and her confidence suggested knowledge that might be essential for mission success. Vasquez, observing the situation from a security position, was experiencing his own moment of recognition. Sarah's underwater performance was revealing skills that none of them had anticipated. Her speed and efficiency made it clear that she wasn't struggling with the water conditions. She was completely at home in an environment that was challenging the rest of them. "Rodriguez, she's moving like she owns this environment," Vasquez transmitted privately to his fellow Marine. "Maybe we should see what she's got in mind before we shut it down." The suggestion represented a significant shift in Vasquez's thinking. His initial assumption that Sarah would need protection and guidance was being replaced by growing recognition that she might be the most qualified team member for underwater operations. Sarah's route change became apparent as she led them into a channel that ran parallel to their original heading, but took advantage of entirely different current patterns. The water flow here worked with them rather than against them, and the immediate reduction in effort required was dramatic. Mitchell, following directly behind Sarah, found that he could maintain position easily while actually increasing their overall speed. Current conditions much better on this heading, Mitchell transmitted to Rodriguez. "Speed is up and energy expenditure way down. She definitely knows something about this water." The acknowledgement from Mitchell carried particular weight because of his extensive combat diving experience. His recognition that Sarah's route selection was based on superior environmental knowledge rather than luck forced a recalculation of assumptions that had seemed unquestionable just minutes earlier. Rodriguez's response revealed his struggle to adapt to the changed situation. "Maintain formation and stay alert for obstacles. We'll evaluate route effectiveness when we reach the objective area." The reply was face-saving rather than tactical, a way of accepting the improved conditions without directly acknowledging that his initial approach had been inferior. Rodriguez was discovering that effective leadership sometimes required flexibility that conflicted with traditional notions of maintaining command authority. As they continued through Sarah's chosen route, the differences in approach became increasingly apparent. Where Rodriguez had relied on physical strength to overcome environmental challenges, Sarah was using environmental knowledge to eliminate those challenges entirely. Her navigation took them through water that actually assisted their movement while providing better concealment and reduced detection signatures. The time savings were significant and measurable. Sarah's route not only avoided the energy-draining conditions of the original approach, but actually delivered them to their objective area 6 minutes ahead of their projected timeline. The team arrived at the underwater entry point with energy reserves intact and stealth parameters maintained throughout their approach. Vasquez, monitoring their tactical situation as they prepared for the transition to land-based operations, found himself reevaluating everything he thought he knew about team capability assessment. Sarah's performance in the water had been flawless. Not just adequate or competent, but demonstrably superior to the approaches favored by operators with more traditional backgrounds. "Chun," he transmitted privately. "That was exceptional navigation. Where did you develop that level of underwater expertise?" Sarah's response was characteristically modest. "Advanced underwater operations training covers harbor navigation in detail. The environment here matched scenarios we studied extensively. Knowledge is only useful if you apply it when conditions are appropriate." The answer revealed something important about Sarah's approach to expertise. She didn't view superior performance as something to highlight or use for competitive advantage. Instead, she treated it as a tool that should be applied when it could benefit team objectives. The soft-spoken confidence that had seemed passive to her teammates was actually the self-assurance of someone who knew her capabilities precisely and applied them strategically. Rodriguez, preparing his gear for the land-based infiltration phase, was struggling with the implications of what had just occurred. His assumption about team leadership had been based on traditional markers: physical presence, aggressive confidence, and combat experience that fit familiar patterns. Sarah's underwater performance had demonstrated expertise that exceeded his own, delivered with a leadership style that achieved results without requiring confrontation or dominance displays. The transition to land-based operations would provide new challenges and different opportunities for team members to demonstrate their capabilities. Rodriguez was determined to reestablish his leadership role in an environment where his experience and physical advantages would be more relevant. What he didn't yet understand was that Sarah's capabilities extended far beyond underwater operations, and the lessons he needed to learn were just beginning. The transition from water to land required precise timing and coordination as the team emerged from the harbor channel onto a narrow rocky beach that provided concealed access to the training facility. Sarah's navigation had delivered them to an entry point that offered optimal cover while positioning them perfectly for the next phase of their mission. The rocky outcropping provided natural concealment from observation posts while offering multiple route options for approaching the facility perimeter. Rodriguez felt more confident as they moved onto terrain that matched his extensive ground combat experience. The underwater phase had been an unexpected challenge to his assumptions, but land-based operations represented his core expertise. He had spent years perfecting approaches to hostile facilities, and his aggressive tactical style had proven effective in environments where decisive action and physical capability determined success. "All right, listen up," Rodriguez whispered as the team consolidated their position behind a rocky cover. "From here we move fast and quiet toward the facility perimeter. Mitchell, you take point. Vasquez, security. Chun, you stay between Mitchell and me, maintain radio discipline, and follow our movement cues." Questions. The plan reflected Rodriguez's preferred approach to ground operations. Simple, aggressive, and built around the capabilities of team members whose performance he understood. Placing Sarah in a protected position wasn't meant as an insult. It was tactical prudence based on his assessment that her underwater excellence might not translate to land-based operations requiring different skills. Sarah's response was the same measured tone that had characterized her earlier communications. "I'd like to review the facility layout and discuss approach options before we commit to a specific route. The perimeter security has some interesting features that might affect our infiltration strategy." The suggestion immediately triggered resistance from Rodriguez, whose experience had taught him that extended planning discussions during active operations created vulnerabilities and reduced momentum. His successful operations have been built on rapid assessment, decisive action, and adaptation during movement rather than detailed pre-planning that could become obsolete when conditions changed. "Chun, we've already reviewed the layout during mission briefing. The plan is solid, and we need to move while we have darkness advantage. Trust the team's experience and focus on maintaining position and communication protocols." Rodriguez's dismissal was automatic, reflecting his assumption that Sarah's desire for additional planning indicated nervousness or unfamiliarity with dynamic tactical situations. What he didn't realize was that her underwater performance had been based on exactly the kind of detailed environmental analysis she was suggesting for their ground approach. Mitchell, preparing to move into point position, shared Rodriguez's preference for action over analysis. The facility security is standard perimeter defense. Motion sensors, cameras, and roving patrols on predictable patterns. We've dealt with this setup plenty of times. Speed and stealth will get us through better than overthinking the approach. The confidence in Mitchell's assessment was based on extensive experience with similar facilities, but it also revealed a critical blind spot. His evaluation assumed that this training facility would follow the same patterns as real-world installations he had encountered. Training facilities, however, were specifically designed to challenge assumptions and test adaptability in ways that operational environments might not. Sarah's next words carried a subtle shift in tone that her teammates were beginning to recognize as significant. The facility includes adaptive security features that respond to infiltration attempts. Standard approaches may trigger responses that compromise our mission timeline. I recommend we take 2 minutes to coordinate our approach based on current intelligence. The phrasing was diplomatic, but the content was clearly informed by specific knowledge that went beyond general tactical principles. Sarah wasn't expressing anxiety about moving forward. She was indicating that their planned approach was based on incomplete information that could affect mission success. Vasquez, whose respect for Sarah's capabilities had been growing since her underwater performance, found himself in the position of potential mediator between conflicting tactical philosophies. What kind of adaptive features are we talking about? If there's something specific we should know, better to address it now than discover it during infiltration. The question opened space for Sarah to provide details that would either validate her concerns or reveal them as unnecessary complications. Her response would determine whether the team adapted their approach or proceeded with Rodriguez's original plan. The facility uses behavioral analysis software that monitors infiltration patterns and adjusts security responses accordingly. Routes that follow predictable tactical principles will trigger enhanced countermeasures. Successful infiltration requires approaches that appear random or unconventional to defeat the analytical algorithms. The explanation revealed knowledge that went far beyond standard tactical training. Sarah was describing security systems that most operators would never encounter outside of specialized scenarios designed to test advanced capabilities. Her familiarity with these systems suggested preparation that exceeded what any of her teammates had undertaken. Rodriguez felt his confidence wavering as he processed the implications of Sarah's information. If she was correct about the facility's security capabilities, then his straightforward approach might not just fail, it might actively trigger responses that would make the mission more difficult. But accepting her tactical input would mean acknowledging that his experience and leadership weren't sufficient for this particular challenge. "How do you know about these systems?" Rodriguez asked, his tone revealing both skepticism and growing concern. "This isn't the kind of information that gets covered in standard briefings." Sarah's answer was characteristically direct. Advanced Tactical Systems training covers emerging security technologies and countermeasures. The facility we're approaching was specifically mentioned as a test platform for behavioral analysis defensive systems. Our approach needs to account for those capabilities. The response made it clear that Sarah's knowledge wasn't based on speculation or general concerns. She had specific information about the challenges they would face that her teammates lacked. Rodriguez found himself confronting a situation where his traditional leadership approach was inadequate for the technical requirements of their mission. Mitchell, monitoring the security perimeter while the team debated tactics, added his perspective to the discussion. "Even if she's right about the security systems, we still need to move. Standing here, analyzing the situation, gives any patrols more time to detect our position. Whatever approach we use, we need to execute it now." The time pressure Mitchell identified was real and significant. Extended discussions in exposed positions violated basic operational security principles, and the team needed to either commit to an approach or relocate to a more secure planning position. Sarah's information was valuable only if it could be applied within tactical time constraints. Sarah seemed to anticipate this concern. "Agreed. I recommend we follow a modified approach that uses irregular movement patterns and unconventional route selection to defeat the behavioral analysis. I can guide the team through an approach that appears random while maintaining tactical effectiveness. The proposal represented a compromise that addressed both the time pressure and the technical challenges Sarah had identified. Rather than requesting extended planning time, she was offering to lead an approach that incorporated her specialized knowledge while maintaining operational momentum. Rodriguez faced a decision that would define his leadership for the remainder of the exercise. He could maintain his authority by proceeding with the original plan, risking mission failure if Sarah's warnings were accurate. Alternatively, he could adapt his approach based on her expertise, effectively acknowledging that her knowledge exceeded his own in this particular situation. "All right," Rodriguez said after a moment of internal struggle. "Show us what you have in mind. But if this gets complicated or slows us down, we revert to the standard approach." Clear. The compromise allowed Rodriguez to maintain nominal leadership while giving Sarah operational control of their infiltration approach. It was the kind of tactical flexibility that effective leaders needed to demonstrate, even when it challenged their preferred methods and assumptions about team capabilities. Sarah's response was immediate and professional. "Understood. Follow my movement cues and maintain irregular spacing. Avoid predictable tactical formations and vary your pace to defeat pattern recognition algorithms. Stay alert for my hand signals indicating route changes." The instructions were clear and specific, delivered with the confidence of someone who understood exactly what needed to be done. As Sarah moved into point position, her teammates could see that her land-based movement was as fluid and controlled as her underwater performance had been. The route Sarah selected defied conventional tactical logic in ways that made her teammates initially uncomfortable. Instead of maintaining cover and concealment along predictable paths, she led them through areas that seemed exposed while avoiding routes that appeared tactically sound. Her movement patterns included random pauses, direction changes, and spacing variations that looked chaotic but served specific purposes. Mitchell, following behind Sarah, found himself struggling to understand the logic behind her choices. "This doesn't feel like any infiltration approach I've ever used," he transmitted quietly. "Are you sure this irregular movement won't just make us easier targets?" Sarah's response came as she led them around what appeared to be optimal cover, choosing instead a route across open ground that seemed tactically questionable. The security system expects conventional approaches. By appearing random and unpredictable, we avoid triggering the enhanced response protocols. Trust the process and maintain irregular movement. The explanation required Mitchell to think about infiltration in entirely new terms. Instead of focusing solely on avoiding detection, Sarah was considering how to avoid identification as a tactical threat by security systems designed to recognize and respond to professional operators. It was a level of tactical sophistication that extended beyond traditional training. Vasquez, monitoring their approach from a security position, could see that Sarah's unconventional route selection was achieving results that contradicted his expectations. Despite appearances, their movement was actually faster and more concealed than the direct approach Rodriguez had planned. Her seemingly random choices were revealing knowledge of sight lines and sensor positions that enabled effective infiltration while defeating automated analysis. "Chun, your route selection is working," Vasquez transmitted. "Timing is excellent, and we're avoiding detection better than expected. How did you identify these optimal paths without visible reconnaissance?" The question reflected Vasquez's growing realization that Sarah's tactical capabilities extended far beyond what any of them had anticipated. Her performance was demonstrating expertise that suggested extensive preparation and training that exceeded standard operator development. Sarah's answer came as she guided them through a particularly complex section of the approach that required precise timing and positioning. Facility analysis during mission preparation included detailed study of security system placement and coverage patterns. The routes were using exploit gaps in coverage that exist specifically because they appear tactically unsound to conventional assessment. The response revealed the depth of preparation that had enabled Sarah's superior performance throughout the exercise. While her teammates had focused on general tactical principles and relied on experience with similar situations, she had invested in comprehensive analysis of the specific challenges they would face. Rodriguez, following Sarah's movement cues while struggling to understand the tactical logic behind her approach, found himself experiencing a fundamental shift in perspective. His assumptions about effective leadership and tactical expertise were being challenged by performance that achieved superior results through methods he didn't understand. The facility perimeter approached faster than expected as Sarah's route delivered them to their objective with time to spare and detection signatures that remained below threshold levels. The infiltration phase that Rodriguez had expected to require maximum effort and careful coordination had been accomplished with an efficiency that made their previous approaches seem crude by comparison. Target reached, Sarah transmitted quietly as they consolidated position near the facility entrance. Perimeter security defeated without triggering enhanced responses. Ready for interior infiltration phase on your signal. The professional tone of her report gave no indication that she had just demonstrated tactical capabilities that exceeded those of her more experienced teammates. Sarah treated superior performance as a normal operational outcome rather than something requiring special recognition or explanation. Rodriguez prepared for the interior phase of their mission with a growing awareness that his initial assessment of team capabilities had been fundamentally flawed. The soft-spoken operator he had dismissed as inexperienced was consistently demonstrating expertise that surpassed his own. The challenge now was adapting his leadership approach to make effective use of capabilities he was only beginning to understand. The interior phase would present new challenges that would test different aspects of team performance. Rodriguez was determined to reassert his leadership role in an environment where his combat experience and tactical knowledge would be more relevant. What he didn't yet realize was that Sarah's capabilities were about to be tested in ways that would reveal the full scope of her training and the inadequacy of his assumptions about what made an effective operator. The interior of the training facility presented a maze of interconnected corridors, rooms, and vertical passages designed to simulate the complex environments that special operations teams might encounter in real-world missions. The facility's layout included multiple levels, blind corners, concealed observation points, and scenarios that required split-second tactical decisions under extreme time pressure. Rodriguez felt more confident as they entered the building, believing that interior operations would favor his extensive close-quarters combat experience and aggressive tactical approach. The confined spaces and potential for direct confrontation represented the kind of environment where his physical presence and decisive leadership had proven most effective throughout his military career. "All right, here's how we handle the interior phase," Rodriguez whispered as the team consolidated behind the entry point Sarah had identified. "Mitchell takes point. I'll coordinate movement and tactical decisions. Vasquez provides security and backup firepower. Chun, you maintain communication with command and handle any technical requirements we encounter. Standard room clearing protocols apply." The plan reflected Rodriguez's comfort with traditional small unit tactics and his assumption that Sarah's technical expertise would be most valuable in support roles rather than direct action situations. He was assigning responsibilities based on familiar patterns that had worked in previous operations with teams whose capabilities he understood completely. Sarah's response carried the same measured tone that had characterized her earlier communications, but her teammates were beginning to recognize subtle indicators that suggested she had information they might need to consider. "Rodriguez, the interior layout includes some unique features that might affect our approach. The facility uses dynamic reconfiguration systems that can alter corridor layouts and room access during operations. Standard clearing protocols may not be optimal for this environment." The information Sarah provided immediately created tension within the team. Rodriguez's confidence was built on proven tactics that had been tested in real-world situations, and he was reluctant to abandon methods that had saved lives in actual combat. Sarah's suggestion implied that their tested approaches might be inadequate for the specific challenges they were about to face. Mitchell, preparing his gear for point position, shared Rodriguez's skepticism about departing from established procedures. Dynamic reconfiguration sounds like science fiction. Even if this place has some automated systems, basic room clearing principles still apply. We move fast, maintain security, and adapt to whatever we find. Overthinking the approach creates hesitation that gets people killed. The dismissal reflected Mitchell's extensive experience with urban warfare situations where rapid, aggressive action had proven superior to complex planning that could become obsolete when conditions changed unexpectedly. His confidence was based on successful operations where traditional tactics had overcome sophisticated opposition through speed and superior training. Vasquez, whose respect for Sarah's capabilities had been growing throughout the exercise, found himself increasingly willing to consider her tactical input. Chin, what exactly do you mean by dynamic reconfiguration? Are we talking about automated doors and security barriers, or something more complex? The question provided Sarah with an opportunity to explain her concerns in detail that would either validate her warnings or reveal them as unnecessary complications based on overthinking relatively straightforward challenges. The facility can reconfigure internal layouts using modular wall systems and automated barriers. Corridors can be blocked, rooms can be subdivided, and access routes can be altered in response to tactical movement patterns. Teams that rely on standard approaches may find themselves trapped or channeled into predetermined kill zones. Sarah's explanation described capabilities that went far beyond normal training facility features. The technology she was describing represented advanced systems designed to test adaptability and tactical flexibility in ways that most operators would never encounter during standard training or operational deployments. Rodriguez felt his confidence eroding as he processed the implications of Sarah's information. If the facility could actively respond to their tactical approach by altering the environment itself, then his experience-based planning might not just be inadequate, it might be actively dangerous. How do you know about these systems? Rodriguez asked, his tone revealing frustration with the growing complexity of what he had expected to be a straightforward operation. This level of facility capability isn't mentioned in standard training materials. Sarah's answer was characteristically direct and technical. Advanced tactical facility analysis is included in specialized operator training for complex environments. This facility was specifically designed to test adaptability against emerging technologies that operators may encounter in high-value target scenarios. The response made it clear that Sarah's knowledge wasn't theoretical or speculative. She had specific training and information about the challenges they would face that her teammates lacked. Rodriguez found himself confronting the reality that his traditional approach to leadership might be insufficient for the technical requirements of their current mission. Mitchell, monitoring the corridor ahead while the team debated their approach, provided a practical perspective on their situation. Whatever systems this place has, we still need to move through it and complete our objectives. We can adapt our tactics as we encounter specific challenges, but we need to start moving before any patrols or security systems detect our position. The time pressure Mitchell identified was accurate and urgent. Extended discussions in potentially compromised positions violated basic security protocols, and the team needed to either commit to an approach or risk detection that would compromise their entire mission. Sarah seemed to anticipate this concern and offered a solution that addressed both the tactical complexity and time constraints they faced. I recommend we move through the facility using adaptive protocols that can respond to environmental changes as we encounter them. I can guide the team through approaches that maintain tactical effectiveness while accounting for dynamic systems. The proposal represented another situation where Sarah was offering to lead the team through challenges that exceeded her teammates' experience while maintaining operational momentum and mission focus. Rodriguez faced another decision that would test his leadership flexibility and willingness to adapt to circumstances that challenged his preferred methods. He could maintain control by proceeding with standard tactics and risk mission failure if Sarah's warnings were accurate, or he could trust her expertise and acknowledge that her specialized knowledge exceeded his own. All right, Chun, you take point. Rodriguez said, his tone revealing the internal struggle between maintaining authority and adapting to mission requirements. Guide us through your adaptive approach, but maintain radio communication and be ready to revert to standard procedures if the situation requires it. The decision represented significant growth in Rodriguez's leadership approach. He was demonstrating the kind of tactical flexibility that effective leaders needed to show when facing challenges that required capabilities beyond their personal expertise. Sarah moved into point position with the fluid confidence her teammates had learned to associate with superior performance. Her movement through the facility's initial corridors demonstrated the same environmental awareness and strategic thinking that had characterized her underwater and exterior approach phases. Follow my movement cues and maintain flexible formation, Sarah transmitted as she led them deeper into the facility. Avoid predictable spacing and be ready for rapid direction changes based on environmental shifts. The facility will test our adaptability continuously. The instructions prepared her teammates for an experience that would challenge their assumptions about interior operations in ways they hadn't anticipated. Sarah's approach treated the facility as a dynamic opponent rather than static terrain, requiring continuous assessment and adaptation rather than execution of predetermined plans. The first indication of the facility's advanced capabilities came as they approached what appeared to be a standard corridor intersection. Sarah paused at the corner, her movements suggesting she was processing information that wasn't visible to her teammates. Corridor reconfiguration in progress, she transmitted quietly. The route ahead is being altered to channel movement toward a tactical disadvantage. We'll use alternative access that bypasses the intended trap. Her words were immediately followed by subtle mechanical sounds that indicated movement within the facility's walls. The corridor they had been approaching was indeed being modified, with barriers deploying that would have forced them into a confined space with limited maneuver options. Mitchell, observing the environmental changes that validated Sarah's warning, found his skepticism being replaced by growing recognition of her capabilities. How did you detect that before it happened? I didn't see any indicators of the system activation. Sarah's response came as she guided them through an alternative route that avoided the modified corridor entirely. The facility provides subtle environmental cues that indicate pending reconfigurations. Training in adaptive facility operations includes recognition of these indicators and appropriate tactical responses. The explanation revealed another layer of specialized knowledge that Sarah possessed beyond her teammates' training and experience. Her ability to read and respond to environmental changes represented skills that most operators would never develop during standard career progression. Vasquez, following Sarah's movement through increasingly complex terrain, was experiencing a fundamental shift in his understanding of operational excellence. Sarah's performance was demonstrating capabilities that exceeded traditional operator training in ways he hadn't believed possible. "Chun, your facility knowledge is exceptional," Vasquez transmitted privately. "This level of environmental awareness goes beyond anything I've encountered in advanced training. Where did you develop these capabilities?" The question reflected Vasquez's growing realization that Sarah represented a new category of operator whose skills extended far beyond traditional special operations training. Her performance suggested preparation and capabilities that redefined what was possible for individual operators. Sarah's answer came as she led them through a section of the facility that required precise timing and positioning to avoid detection by multiple sensor systems. Naval Special Warfare development programs include exposure to emerging technologies and tactics that may become relevant in future operational environments. This facility represents one category of challenge that operators may encounter. The response indicated that Sarah's training had included preparation for scenarios that exceeded the experience of most current operators. Her capabilities reflected investment in advanced development that positioned her for challenges that traditional training hadn't anticipated. Rodriguez, following Sarah's tactical leadership while struggling to understand the complexity of her decision-making process, found himself experiencing a complete reevaluation of his assumptions about operator capabilities and effective leadership. Sarah's performance was revealing skills that he hadn't known existed within special operations training. The team's progress through the facility accelerated as Sarah's adaptive approach proved consistently effective against the dynamic challenges they encountered. Each environmental change that could have trapped or channeled a conventional approach was anticipated and countered by route selections that maintained tactical advantage while achieving mission objectives. Objective area approaching, Sarah transmitted as they neared the facility's central target zone. Final phase will require close quarters engagement with multiple opponents. Recommend we coordinate our approach based on individual capabilities and optimal positioning for tactical success. The upcoming close quarters combat phase would test different aspects of team performance and provide new opportunities for her teammates to observe Sarah's capabilities under direct pressure. Rodriguez was determined to reassert his leadership role in an environment where his combat experience would be most relevant, but he was beginning to understand that his assumptions about tactical capability and effective performance needed fundamental revision. The stage was set for a final phase that would complete the education of 6 Marines who had begun the day confident in their understanding of what made an effective operator and what constituted appropriate leadership in tactical situations. The final objective area opened into a large multi-level space designed to simulate a complex tactical environment where multiple threats could emerge from various positions and angles. The facility's central chamber featured elevated platforms, concealed positions, automated target systems, and environmental obstacles that would test every aspect of close quarters combat capability under extreme time pressure. Rodriguez felt a surge of confidence as they approached this phase of the exercise. Close quarters combat represented his core expertise, the kind of direct action scenario where his aggressive tactics, physical presence, and extensive combat experience had consistently proven superior. This was the environment where his leadership would be most relevant, and where Sarah's technical knowledge would be less critical than raw combat capability. All right, this is what we've been building toward, Rodriguez whispered as the team consolidated outside the objective area. Multiple hostile positions, complex terrain, time pressure. Standard CQC protocols apply. Mitchell, you take left sector. Vasquez, right sector coverage. Chun, you provide backup and handle any technical systems we encounter. I'll coordinate movement and target prioritization. The plan reflected Rodriguez's understanding of close quarters combat as primarily a physical challenge requiring aggressive action and superior firepower rather than tactical complexity that might benefit from Sarah's analytical approach. He was confident that this phase would demonstrate the value of traditional operator skills and validate his leadership approach. Sarah's response carried a familiar pattern that her teammates were learning to recognize as significant. Rodriguez, the engagement area includes some unique features that might affect our tactical approach. The automated threat systems use adaptive algorithms that respond to conventional CQC tactics. Standard approaches may trigger enhanced difficulty scenarios. The warning immediately created tension within the team. Rodriguez's confidence was built on tactics that had been proven in actual combat situations, and he was reluctant to abandon methods that had saved lives in real-world operations. Sarah's suggestion that their proven approaches might be inadequate seemed to challenge the fundamental principles of his military experience. Mitchell, preparing for what he expected to be intense close-quarters action, shared Rodriguez's skepticism about departing from established procedures. CQC is about speed, aggression, and superior training. Whatever automated systems this place has, they can't change the basic principles of tactical engagement. We move fast, shoot straight, and dominate through superior capability. The dismissal reflected Mitchell's extensive experience with urban warfare, where traditional tactics had consistently overcome sophisticated opposition through disciplined execution of proven methods. His confidence was based on successful operations where conventional approaches had achieved tactical superiority against determined enemies. Vasquez, whose respect for Sarah's capabilities had grown consistently throughout the exercise, found himself increasingly willing to consider her tactical input, despite his natural inclination to support his fellow Marines' approach. Chin, what exactly are these adaptive algorithms designed to do? Are we talking about moving targets, or something more complex that affects our tactical options? The question provided Sarah with an opportunity to explain her concerns in detail that would either validate her warnings or reveal them as unnecessary complications based on overthinking a fundamentally straightforward challenge. The automated threat systems analyze engagement patterns and adjust difficulty, positioning, and response timing to counter conventional tactics. Teams that rely on standard CQC approaches will face progressively more challenging scenarios designed to test adaptability and tactical innovation rather than basic combat skills. Sarah's explanation described capabilities that went beyond normal training scenarios. The systems she was describing were designed to specifically test operator ability to adapt and innovate under pressure rather than simply execute predetermined tactics against static challenges. Rodriguez felt his confidence wavering as he processed the implications of Sarah's information. If the engagement systems could actively counter their tactical approach by analyzing and responding to conventional methods, then his experience-based planning might not just be insufficient. It might actually become a liability as the systems adapted to his preferred tactics. How are you supposed to fight opponents that adapt to your methods in real time? Rodriguez asked, his tone revealing frustration with the growing complexity of what he had expected to be a straightforward combat scenario. Combat effectiveness is built on proven tactics that work regardless of enemy capabilities. Sarah's answer reflected the same analytical approach that had characterized her performance throughout the exercise. Effective engagement requires tactical unpredictability that prevents the systems from developing countermeasures. Success depends on approaches that appear random or unconventional while maintaining combat effectiveness through superior positioning and timing. The response suggested that Sarah's specialized training had included preparation for scenarios that exceeded traditional combat training. Her approach to close-quarters combat apparently incorporated tactical flexibility that could overcome adaptive opposition through methods that conventional training hadn't addressed. Mitchell, monitoring the engagement area while the team debated tactics, provided a practical perspective on their situation. Whatever systems this place has, we still need to neutralize the threats and complete our objectives. We can adapt our tactics as we encounter specific challenges, but we need to initiate contact before the scenario timeline expires. The time pressure Mitchell identified was real and critical. Extended discussions before engagement violated fundamental CQC principles that emphasized rapid initiation and aggressive action to maintain tactical initiative against hostile forces. Sarah seemed to anticipate this concern and offered a solution that addressed both the tactical complexity and time constraints they faced. I recommend we engage using fluid tactics that can adapt to system responses as we encounter them. I can coordinate our approach to maintain unpredictability while ensuring effective target neutralization. The proposal represented another situation where Sarah was offering to lead the team through challenges that exceeded her teammates' experience while maintaining operational momentum and mission effectiveness. Rodriguez faced a final decision that would determine whether he could adapt his leadership style to accommodate capabilities that exceeded his own understanding and experience. He could maintain control by proceeding with standard tactics and risk mission failure if Sarah's warnings proved accurate, or he could trust her expertise in an area where her specialized knowledge might be essential for success. "Chun, you coordinate the engagement," Rodriguez said, his tone revealing the internal struggle between maintaining familiar authority and adapting to mission requirements that exceeded his expertise. "But we maintain CQC fundamentals and stay ready to revert to standard procedures if your approach becomes too complex for effective execution." The decision represented the culmination of Rodriguez's evolution as a leader throughout the exercise. He was demonstrating tactical flexibility while maintaining responsibility for team safety and mission success, the kind of adaptive leadership that effective commanders needed to show when facing challenges that required capabilities beyond their personal experience. Sarah moved into coordination position with a fluid confidence her teammates had learned to associate with superior performance. Her approach to the engagement area demonstrated the same environmental awareness and strategic thinking that had characterized her performance throughout the exercise. Engage on my signal using irregular movement patterns and unconventional positioning, Sarah transmitted as she analyzed the tactical environment. Avoid predictable approach routes and maintain flexible formation. Target prioritization will shift based on system adaptation to our methods. The instructions prepared her teammates for a combat experience that would challenge their understanding of close quarters engagement in ways they hadn't anticipated. Sarah's approach treated the automated systems as intelligent opponents rather than mechanical targets, requiring continuous assessment and tactical innovation. The engagement commenced with Sarah leading a movement pattern that defied conventional tactical logic. Instead of using standard sector assignments and fire team coordination, she guided them through an approach that appeared chaotic but served specific purposes related to defeating automated analysis systems. Targets engaging from elevated positions, Mitchell transmitted as the first phase of contact began. Response patterns are definitely more complex than standard training scenarios. They're adapting to our movement faster than expected. His observation validated Sarah's warnings about the advanced nature of the systems they were facing. The automated threats were demonstrating capabilities that exceeded normal training scenarios in ways that challenged traditional tactical approaches. Sarah's response came as she coordinated a tactical movement that placed each team member in positions that maximized their individual capabilities while maintaining unpredictable collective action. Maintain irregular engagement patterns and avoid sustained contact from any single position. The systems will adapt to repetitive tactics within seconds. The coordination Sarah provided revealed tactical understanding that went far beyond standard CQC training. Her ability to manage complex engagement scenarios while maintaining team effectiveness demonstrated skills that redefined what was possible for individual operators. Vasquez, engaging targets from a position Sarah had selected for optimal tactical advantage, found himself experiencing combat effectiveness that exceeded his previous experience. Chun, your positioning guidance is exceptional. I've got optimal fields of fire while maintaining protection from multiple threat vectors. The acknowledgement reflected Vasquez's recognition that Sarah's tactical coordination was achieving results that surpassed traditional methods through approaches he hadn't encountered in extensive training and operational experience. Rodriguez, following Sarah's tactical guidance while engaging multiple threats, was experiencing the most fundamental challenge to his understanding of combat leadership and operator capability. Sarah's coordination was achieving tactical results that exceeded what he had believed possible through methods that challenged everything he thought he knew about effective combat operations. All targets neutralized, Sarah transmitted as the final phase of the engagement concluded. Mission objectives achieved within timeline parameters. Team performance exceeded evaluation standards across all measure criteria. The professional tone of her report gave no indication that she had just demonstrated tactical capabilities that redefined her teammates' understanding of what constituted operator excellence. Sarah treated superior performance as a normal operational outcome rather than something requiring special recognition. The exercise concluded with the team having achieved complete success across all phases while consistently exceeding performance standards that had been established based on traditional operator capabilities. Rodriguez, Mitchell, and Vasquez found themselves confronting the reality that their initial assumptions about leadership, capability, and effective tactical performance had been fundamentally challenged by Sarah's demonstration of skills that exceeded their understanding and experience. Lieutenant Commander Hayes conducted the post-exercise debriefing with particular attention to the team dynamics and leadership adaptations that had occurred throughout the operation. The exercise had been designed to test exactly the kind of flexibility and recognition of diverse capabilities that Rodriguez had been forced to demonstrate. The performance metrics for this team exceeded expectations across all phases, Hayes informed the assembled operators. Particularly notable was the tactical adaptation that occurred as team members recognized and utilized capabilities that exceeded initial assessments. This kind of flexible leadership and capability recognition represents exactly what we need for future joint operations. Rodriguez, reflecting on the day's events, found himself fundamentally changed by his experience with Sarah's capabilities. The soft voice that had seemed inappropriate for combat leadership had proven to be just one element of an operator whose skills redefined what he thought he knew about tactical excellence and effective leadership. The 6 Marines who had begun the day confident in their understanding of strength, leadership, and combat capability returned to their units with a new appreciation for the complexity of operator excellence and the importance of recognizing capabilities that might not fit traditional expectations. Sarah's performance had demonstrated that the most effective operators might not always match conventional assumptions about what made someone suited for elite military service. Her quiet confidence, analytical approach, and technical expertise had proven superior to traditional methods in every phase of their operation. The exercise concluded with all participants having learned essential lessons about the value of adaptive leadership, the importance of recognizing diverse capabilities, and the reality that effective performance often came in forms that challenged preconceived notions about what constituted military excellence. For Sarah, the day had been another opportunity to apply her training and capabilities in service of mission success and team effectiveness. The soft voice that had drawn so much initial comment had proven to be perfectly suited for the kind of tactical communication and coordination that elite operations required. The story of the quiet Navy SEAL who dominated 6 Marines would become part of the training folklore at Naval Special Warfare Command, serving as a reminder that exceptional capability often came in unexpected packages and that effective leadership required the flexibility to recognize and utilize excellence regardless of its form.